back, everyone, to another episode of the AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mark Ritter, here with Christian Dominique. Christian, how are you doing today?
Very good. And you, Mark?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. Today, we're going to be talking about intimacy in the age of AI and social media, specifically why sex, dating, long term love, and belonging have been eroding for 15 years and what peer reviewed record actually supports. So, we're going to be pulling up data. We're going to be talking about a lot of statistics, facts, and just general trends that we're seeing in modern culture nowadays and its correlation to modern technology and technology use. So this is a conversation that I'm looking forward to, and it's great to speak to you again, Christian.
Thanks, Mark. This is a very interesting topic. You know that digital wellness is always looking to create real connections, and we're noting that there is some erosion of this interpersonal and even communal communities are not forming. I think I've mentioned many times that there's less picnics, right? Nature and people together eating, which used to be normal, has become less normal. Instead, we have people posting pictures about their food. I don't know if that's as effective. A few numbers in 1990. So let's go way back. Over half of American adults said they had sex in the past week, and now in 2024, it's dropped to 37%. So that's weekly sex, but we can talk about many other things. The share of young adults who report no sex at all in the past year has doubled since 2010. So 2 times more people that have no sex in 12 months. That might be a little bit alarming. What do you think, Mark? And then last one for you. 1 in 3 said that they've chosen AI over a real person for a serious conversation. So that's not about sex.
Wow.
We're talking about digital friends, companionship. So you rather talk to an AI over a real person. 33% would choose that.
I mean, those numbers are quite startling, considering that more and more people are starting to choose AI companions. I think I mentioned this on the last podcast, but there was the case of the Japanese woman who was the first person to get married to her Chat GPT soulmate. And perhaps we're going to be seeing more cases like that coming up in the future where people are falling in love with their AI models and, dating them and essentially not having any sort of resistance, conflict with these models because they're trained to be very supportive and sycophantic and agree with a lot of what people say. And, we don't even know what the consequences are of that essentially. But I think coming back to statistic that you said weekly sex among adults 18 to 64 fell from 55% in 1990 to about 37% in 2024. This almost goes against what we see in modern culture. It seems to like people are having more sex because it's talked about a lot more in media and shown a lot more. There seems to be just this strange dichotomy between the more people talk about it, the less people have it. What do you think what does some of the data say about what like the causes are of this behavior, of this trend?
Well, first of all, just to reassure you, you are my soulmate, Mark. So you will not be replaced by AI. Don't worry about it.
Oh, thank you.
Uh, in terms of the statistic, I think it's a good point because there is some misconception of right. This looks like people are having more sex. If you look at Instagram, people are having fun. They look like they're having friends, fun, and sex, perhaps, or they're sexy, or they're doing right. In reality, is that they're replacing the real human need for touch and connection with this kind of synthetic intimacy, as we can call it. And so that synthetic intimacy, that synthetic happiness, that's trending up. You can see all the likes and reshare, repost. And reality, when you look at the science and surveys and also scientific studies, people are not having friends, sex, intimacy, right? And that's kind of, we really have to understand that social media is warping the reality in a way that doesn't reflect what's going on. And if you spend time talking to people, you will figure those things out, and then we can go into the science of why that matters, right?
I think there's also a sort of dark reality here, and just JAMA Network Open had a study where Ueda and colleagues revealed that sexual inactivity in the past year among men alone, 18 to 24, rose from roughly 19% to 31%. And I don't know if we've talked about this, but there are some theories about monogamy in societies being so monogamy essentially ensures that the greatest number of people, both male and female, end up having a partner. Because if you had a polyamorous society, it would create a disparity, a gap if one person had multiple partners between the sexes. And so the goal with that of having most people match up with a partner in society is that it would decrease the chance of revolt and rebellion, basically violent male behavior. And we're
Hmm.
seeing a lot of that already. I think Scott Galloway has also said one of the most dangerous things in society are lonely young men, right? And essentially, one might ask, why aren't we seeing rebellion in our society right now? One could also argue that many of them are being sedated, perhaps by pornography or sexual media online, and a lot of enticing videos that are meant to mimic or some semblance of intimacy with a woman or subscribing to an OnlyFans model. And I think it really is sedating these men and making them, preventing them from taking action in their lives. And it's just a very sad reality. It's almost a dystopia that we're living in. And when you look at the facts, the statistics here, it's just it's startling. It's really hard to wrap your mind around.
Well, thanks, Mark. And we have a full episode if you guys want to look for our episode on pornography. We have a deep dive on pornography, addiction, and positive pornography as well, um, and how it intertwines in the lives of couples, individuals, and it,
Mhm.
it's a study on its own. But when you talk about, let's say, solo behavior, which is masturbation, which can be with or without pornography.
Yeah.
It can be video, it can be
Mhm.
erotic audio, written, whatever, or just thoughts, right? But let's just say solo behavior also decline,
Yeah.
which is interesting from a
Uh,
Rubinic study that's using data from 2009 to 2018,
mhm.
and that talks about you, right? So again, we're here to help educators, parents, and youth themselves, as well as the society at large,
Yeah.
understand mental wellness and wellness in general, which includes, sex. We have puberty, and after that, we start to have sexual desires, urges that will be either fulfilled solo or with a partner sexual behavior, right? So 14 to 17-year-old boys report neither partner sex nor masturbation. Um, that used to be 29, now it's 44%. And for girls, 14 to 17, they had 50% of no masturbation or partner sex,
Mhm.
and it rose to 74, right? So it seems
Mm.
like everyone is having less sex and also less self pleasure behavior, even though there's more
Mhm.
to watch. There's billions of different videos you can watch.
Mm.
Hopefully you're over 18 to watch them, and that's the issue also that we talked about, that those measures to make
Mhm.
sure that you're over 18 to watch this content is not that good. But even that, we're seeing lower solo behavior. What do you think about that, Mark?
Lower solo behavior is quite concerning. Just before we continue, Christian, I think you might be having problems with your microphone, and it's sounding very choppy, a little bit difficult to understand you. And I think Hannah put a suggestion in the chat for you to fix that. But I'll respond to your question. So yes, it is quite concerning that we're seeing less solo behavior, which actually, would go against what I would have believed, that less intimate behavior with partners would mean more solo behavior amongst people. But again, perhaps it comes back to the argument that people are being more sedated nowadays, and the product of inundating yourself with mass amounts of media, whether they're sexual or just for entertainment's sake, directly corresponds to a lack of action, essentially inaction. And I spoke with a number of digital nomads this week who are talking to me about how difficult it is for them to actually take action in their lives. It makes sense, but just by means of being on your computer all day, that you're just consuming information and you're fueling a part of the brain called the default mode network, which is responsible for thinking when you don't think that you're thinking. Overanalysis, doubt, thoughts is the prerequisite to more thinking and lack of action. And when people say to me, I don't know how to take action, how do I take action? Well, essentially, the motivation itself is a product of the action, not a product of the thinking. But we've been taught in our society to think our way out of problems when in reality we have to act our way out of problems. But the nature of social media and the internet is a consumptive one, meaning that everything we do online is consuming information rather than producing it. And that trains the brain, it conditions the brain in a very, very specific way. I want to get to a very important statistic for a moment, also about married couples. I'm not sure if you had mentioned this as well. It fell from 59% married adults reporting weekly sex from 1996 to 2008, on average, to 49% between the years 2010 2024. Um, and so this also, corresponding with this, we're seeing the rise in the number of divorces that we're seeing alone in the United States. So 60% of people get a divorce after 3 to 5 years. Isn't that's insane? That's 2/3 of people getting married nowadays end up getting a divorce within 3 to 5 years. It just blows my mind, and it's not just the intimacy, but also just the lack of commitment, perhaps the lack of being able to choose a long-term partner, a higher degree of uncertainty amongst people. Everyone that I speak to who is coming to me as a client, and asking for help, is talking about having this degree of uncertainty that just envelops their life and not knowing what to do about that. And it affects every decision that they take, and it affects almost all aspects of their mental health. Um, and so perhaps this is probably also a leading cause of the lack of intimacy, decreasing data or decreasing amount of sex that people are having nowadays. The perceived consequence of getting to know somebody and just rather staying at home and getting that instant gratification. Christian, do you have thoughts on all of this? I'm sorry, I unloaded it quite a bit on you.
And no, that's perfect. And thanks for giving context. Is my mic a little bit better now?
It sounds very good now. Yeah, yeah, it sounds great.
Perfect. So it's very important to mention that it's not only about individual but couple, even long-term relationship, right? We often talked about the idea of dating apps being one time, a few times, then next, right? But we're talking about people who committed their life to spend their life together, who are leaving in a few years at a massive rate, right? So that's concerning. And then,
Mhm,
are we able to talk about the biology? Because yes, we know, for instance, that women can sustain, perhaps a better post breakup life for a while. We know, for instance, that women, I think it's 78% of divorces are initiated by women, right? So they're less satisfied in some way. Um, is it from the fact that we also know that women are, um, when we talk about the big five, they're more neurotic. It's not pejorative. It's just the term neuroticism, which means that are more prone to be anxious or depressive, right? So all those cause, again, it's not to put we're hearing a lot on the internet, it's the game of woman versus man, who's doing what and what. No, we're just talking about the biology and the science, and how can we all be together in good relationship, monogamous or otherwise, but healthy and consensual, that allows for this intimacy that we want. There's this kind of idea that we don't need touch. While we were in the pandemic or in the restriction of our lives, and we found that we need hug, we need touch, right? We're in a virtual world. We know that the oxytocin and vasopressin are released by touch, by eye contact, by smile, by shared laughter. It's the bonding hormone, right? And there is some studies that say you need 80 hugs a day. Well, it's not exactly that. Different people did need different things at different times of their lives, at different times of the day. Everything is more dynamic than a fixed number. But we know that more, um, wanted touch. Of course, we're not talking about unwanted touch or unwanted sexual behavior, but more touch and hug, and the longer, right, instead of a 2-second hug, 20, 30 deeper hug. Yes, it actually touches many fibers of your skin is the biggest organ of your body, right? So we're using our brain, but also we need to understand our skin. We need to understand our hormones, and to know that there's different types of fibers. One of the fibers is a CT class of fibers that responds more to some certain types of touch and vibration, like caressing. And you can have other primates and other animals also responds to different variation. If the vibration of the stroking is too high, then it's not comfortable. If it's too low, then it's not also pleasurable. So there's a sweet spot, like almost everything, balance, right? Digital balance and balance in terms of touch and what your body needs or want. And people can even use the term like thirst, right? Are you thirsty for touch? Do you need touch in your life? Yes, you have touch. You need water eventually, and you also need physical touch and intimacy.
So it's not just that the rates of sex are going down, it's that we're actually becoming more and more out of touch with our partner's needs, right? And it's startling to think that we're losing our empathy essentially. Do you think it's also just due to social media and internet and technology?
I think it's due to both the technology, but also the culture, and they can be intertwined, right? So you know, empathy again. There's different types of empathy. It can be intellectual empathy. I understand what you might feel or think, or it can be
Mhm,
emotional empathy. I feel what you feel, or something similar in the same direction of your feelings, right?
mhm,
I just had a cousin who lost his father. So I
mm,
this morning, early morning, I had to share my condolences. I know him
mhm.
and his family well. I'm going to talk to the rest of the family later today. They're in the U.S. Um, I care about them. I feel empathy, but can I pretend that I feel the same feelings as he's having to go through right now? No, either, right? So I think I prefer the word compassion and care, and also active listening, right?
Mm.
Don't assume that you know what the other person is feeling. And when you talk about needs, ask about what your partner needs, and ask what you need as well. Don't just say, "Oh, I have empathy, so I figured out what they need." Probably not, right? Maybe they haven't even figured out what they need, which is often the case, as you know, Mark, right? So I think it's this constant communication that will bring not only empathy in the equation, but kind of a dynamic, open communication to see, those are my emotional needs, those are my physical needs, those are my intellectual needs, right? And they're all valid, and they can be talked about, so that relationships don't break up after 2 years, right?
So yeah, I think people need to also learn how to communicate better, essentially. And Um, we've already seen data suggesting that when kids are raised with iPads, not only do we see a higher incidence of something like autism disorder, and this has been studied and shown, but we're also noticing that depriving these kids of social contact during their teenage or, or during adolescence or young adulthood is something that can lead to cognitive impairments. And it's not just kids, it's also adults who need this contact, right? Um, again, after speaking with a number of digital nomads and remote workers in the last couple of weeks, I've just seen very common trends amongst the types of complaints that I get, the patterns that I see from these people who are working inside of their home in front of a screen all day, getting frustrated and not being able to focus, not being able to take action. All these things are pointing to a suspectable culprit. And we should not neglect our own needs in the process. I'm going to start off with another statistic here, just on the loneliness piece. So, Bucher and colleagues, they pre-registered a cross-temporal meta-analysis. Basically, they studied a bunch of other studies in the Psychological Bulletin in 2021. Basically, they looked at 345 studies, roughly 125,000 emerging adults from 1976 to 2019. Loneliness rose linearly by about 0.56 standard deviations over the period, with the increase concentrated in North American samples. This kind of comes back to what you're saying about cultures. Like, what the problems that we're talking about mostly affect, I would say, modern develop or not modern, but developed Western cultures and societies. We're talking United States, Canada, Europe, Western Europe, that is. But if we look at, right, places in Africa, they have much more, I would say, visceral challenges that they're dealing with, like when it comes to hunger or thirst, right? Or, poverty, all this stuff, which does not negate basically the challenge that they're facing there. It's a much realer challenge, but they're I would say that they're not suffering from this same type of psychological distress that you would see in these modern developed countries. Sometimes you don't see it at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes certain
You know,
civilizations don't even have concept of depression. It just doesn't exist. They just
mm,
say, "Okay, we're gonna have this person in the village spend time with the other villagers," and then the depression goes away. I think that's a Johann Hari quote. I heard him say in Chasing the Scream.
I think it might be also different factors, right? Again, it's a holistic approach where you might have less food, so you have food and water shortage, but you have community, you have family, you have strong social bonds, right? There is some studies that show that lack of social bond not only decrease
Mm,
your subjective well-being or happiness,
yeah,
also decrease your health, right? So if you don't have that social bond, that deeper connection than this, what we talked about at the beginning of the episode, artificial connection, artificial intimacy, artificial relationship, that you rather talk to an AI than a real person, then your health is also declining, and maybe they don't have this depression that we in the Western
yeah,
educated modern world are using antidepressant to solve, right?
right. Yeah, by the way, Christian, your mic is starting to glitch again, so just check into that. But you're absolutely right that, we don't have this concept, like, in the developing world of taking antidepressants for depression, because, again, if somebody exhibits signs of depression, then, either the villagers will come together and surround them, give them that social contact that they're perhaps deprived of, or depression could be the incentive, the motivation to actually go on and change something. So a lot of it comes down to, how do we interpret what is happening to us, and how do we respond to that. When we're feeling sad, right, we can think like, I know it's not even worth trying anymore, or we can say, like, if I keep acting this way, if I keep up this pattern of behavior, I'm going to be getting the same result that I have been in the past couple weeks, months, or years. Why not go out, challenge myself to try a different pattern of behavior? Meaning, you leave the comfort zone a little bit and you go every day and you give yourself a new challenge. Meet one new person every day. If you have social anxiety, go approach somebody every day. If you have social anxiety, if you're afraid of heights, go visit a tall building every day. Right? Gradually expose yourself to the thing that perhaps gives you the most fear, in doses, willingly, over time, is one of the most proven non-pharmacological methods to overcoming anxiety disorders. Yet so little people actually do it, because they've convinced themselves that, oh, I just need to watch a video online on how to do it and then I've overcome it. That's not the case. Uh, it's just not the case. So, coming back to some of the data here, uh, Canon and Veazey in 2023, using the American Time Use Survey from 2003 to 2020, reported rising time alone and falling in-person social engagement, with the steepest drops in youth time with friends. The paper anchored the U.S. Surgeon General's 2023 advisory on loneliness and isolation. I think the Surgeon General showed that essentially loneliness has a similar effect on health to smoking essentially a pack of cigarettes a day, that it cuts your lifespan by like 10 or 15 years on average. So it's essential, even if for introverted people, to spend time with others, go out,
Yeah.
talk,
Again,
right?
to clarify for the audience, loneliness, and we had, I think, an episode on that as well.
Yeah.
Loneliness is not being alone, is feeling that you don't belong or feeling that you need that connection, right? So even people that need less time with others, some people, and it also again depends on the time of the day or the week, right? So you might want to see a lot of people during the day, but in the evening you want to be alone, or the opposite, or in the week or in the month, right? So everything's dynamic, but the feeling of not being connected to other people. For instance, you can be in the same room with five, six of your friends, and we did in Montreal a workshop. We did a workshop at the university. One of the participant was saying, "I am in the room with my friends, but they're all on their phone, and I don't feel that I'm belonging." Right.
Yeah.
So the feeling of loneliness is different than being alone. Right. Being alone can be good. You need some alone time.
Yeah, and I've actually noticed this is I think when we spoke to Catherine Martinko a few weeks ago, I had asked her, sometimes my partner has a tendency to use her phone even when I'm with her, when I'm driving and she's on her phone. And I've tried bringing this up with her before, but she seems just not to really register like the effect that it has on me. What Catherine suggested actually was, instead of saying, "Don't do that, stop using your phone," tell the other person how it makes you feel. Like, when you use your phone, I feel really lonely. I feel like you're not there. I feel like I'm alone in this car and you're not with me. And that certainly registers with the person, rather because essentially you're directing that their focus to the effect of their behavior on you and how you feel.
Well, thanks for mentioning that. We've talked since last year about phubbing, which is using technology in the presence of others in a way that it interrupts or is not conducive to real relationship, right? So actually, it comes from McDaniel and Coin who coined technoference first, and then Roberts and David also confirmed the, the findings, the pattern, and name it phubbing, which is more interesting than technoference. But the idea is the same, right? So it talks about you feeling disconnected with another person because of technology interference, mainly looking at your screen, the news, but it could be TV, it could be many things, right? Or in a more broad way, we can call it technology conflict, and it lowers relationship satisfaction and life satisfaction, right? It increases the depression symptom, you don't feel good about it. And as you mentioned, it's not just the number of hours or the scrolling that makes a difference. There's a new study in 2023 that nuanced this finding, talking about the perceived partner phubbing that predicts the lower relationship quality, right? So we talked about relationship satisfaction and life satisfaction. Actually, it's not only the time, but it's the perceived or the perception of the intimacy attack, right? You want to spend a connection, an intimate moment with your partner, and you feel like attention is being stolen by something else, and that person is not even noticing the lack of attention, right? So, very good, real example, Mark. The not only the time spent, but the perception of your partner, right? So it's very important to have this communication. We always prone families, parents, couples to have communication about technology use and to say, this is how it makes me feel when you do that, right?
Yeah, and I think, it's the perception of how much time somebody's devoting to you or attention they're devoting to you is, directly affecting your own coping habits and behaviors, right, in this whole mix. Christian, I think you're having a little bit of trouble with your mic again, just so you know, so I'll move on to the next point, the friendship substrate. So survey data from American Perspectives in 2021 suggests that the share of Americans reporting no close friends at all roughly quadrupled since 1990. Um, it's a bit of a different instrument than the older Gallup baseline that is compared against, but still, the statistic that the number of people with no close friendships right? Somebody that you could consider um, calling in the case of emergency, or somebody that you can disclose secrets and be vulnerable with, um, has quadrupled. So no close friends essentially. And another study by Twang and colleagues documented steep declines in adolescent in-person time with friends after 2010, the same window as the smartphone diffusion curve. There is a correlation in the timing, and there is a bit of a debate about whether the causality here, whether that is coming directly from smartphones, but we can argue that like a lot of it is coming from the screen time, especially with adolescents. But just this statistic about people having no close friends at all, um, is really startling. On the one hand, it worries me, but I do remember like seeing a YouTube video once that went super viral. It was like a guy uh, it- recording himself in front of a camera, and he was like, "I have no friends." And he was like a good-looking guy. He had a wife, right? And but he just said, "I have no friends," and he's like, just by circumstance, like his previous friends from high school, they moved away, and he didn't have any contact with them at all. And there was just an outpouring of love in the comments, right? People like suggesting, "Hey, come reach out to me." So I'm not trying to bash technology all the way. I met up with someone yesterday in the evening for golfing that I met on Reddit, and I just said, "Hey, does anybody here in Munich play Reddit?" And somebody responded, and I met him in person. He was a great guy. There is a lot of potential for connection, but that's not the way that most people are using technology, and that's the point that I'm saying. Most people use it in a more passive, consumptive state rather than actively looking and searching for real connections um, in their life. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on the friendship and the decline in close friends over the years, Christian?
That's something that is definitely a concern of us at awe in terms of creating those real connections that are eroding. Um, as you know, when we talked last podcast, that we're on the final stage this month to create this new AI called QP. So QP will help in relationship bonding, peer bonding outside of the AI world, but is using AI trained on ethical AI and recognizing emotion. It can help you alone if you're, feeling lonely or need to have help with your relationships. It can be friendships, it can be romantic, it can be family relationship. And what's I think more important is that it allows people to connect via this mediator, right? So QP can have multiple people in a conversation, a partner, romantic partners, a couple, a family, a few friends that might have, people are having issues with their friends as well, right? So, yes, my friend used to do that, but moved away, like you said, and I don't, and I feel bad to say that I miss my friend because that's not good, right? So there's a lot of problems with communication. QP is good for helping you with communication, helping you to understand your and other people's emotion, have compassion, and create those lasting bond to have hopefully less failed divorce, failed marriage, divorce statistics that we're talking about. People with no friends, right? Those are real statistics, and that's one of the reasons Mark and I said, let's create something that brings people back together instead of the trend of that we're seeing, right?
Where can people get access to QP and these other apps that Awe offers?
So we have Lumi, Medi, and Habi available for our user at awdigitalwellness.com or awwellness.org. And QP, Louis, and a few other AIs like Eddie are specialized for different types of engagement. You can contact us to have access for your school, your organizations, or your community at awwellness.org. There's some form, or you can reach out to Mark and myself on LinkedIn. Mark D. Ritter, Ritter, or Christian Dominic, QUE. We really create those AI with ethical boundaries and with the idea that those AIs will not replace human, will not be the 33% that you'd rather be with the AI than with your friend. Our AI, QP, will tell you, don't be with me. go see your friends, right? So that's the idea.
Mhm. Thanks. Yeah, no, that's check out awedigitalwellness.com to find those apps. And again, reach out to Christian or I if you have more question. Let's move on to dating apps for a second because it is the primary way that people are meeting their romantic partners nowadays. It has superseded all other forms of dating and meeting long-term partners since I think 2015, with Tinder, Bumble, Hinge among the few that dominate the app market. So there was a 2025 systemic review and meta-analysis in computers and human behavior. 23 studies were looked at, over 26,000 participants found that dating app users report worse psychological health and well-being than non-users, more depression, anxiety, loneliness, and distress. Nearly all of it is cross-sectional, so the direction is somewhat unknown, but the apps do have a tendency to erode well-being, and people who are struggling may use the apps more or both. So essentially, I tell this story sometimes, but these apps, they're apps at the end of the day, and apps have very specific metrics to maintain and help the app grow. So engagement and retention and monthly active users and all that stuff. So they're measured by the same with the same business metrics essentially.
They don't have couples retention, unfortunately, it seems, right?
Well, there are some like Hinge that like advertise themselves or they market themselves as being the app that's meant to be deleted, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make that sense to delete an app from their perspective because they want more people using it. That's like saying, okay, this is the mattress that you can throw away after 6 months. It's like, no, I want to keep a mattress for a much longer period of time, like forever, if essentially if I could. Um, but essentially, when this a lot of these apps they use sort of like push notification system to help brings people back into the app. So somebody who's lonely, they might get a push notification saying something along the lines of somebody's waiting to meet you, right? There's somebody in the app waiting to meet you. And of course, most people think like, oh, I've got a match. Like there's somebody waiting to meet me. That's not what it means. It means that there's somebody waiting to meet you out there in the ether who you haven't met yet, who you haven't matched with yet. You just have to swipe a little bit more, and then you can increase the likelihood of that you'll actually meet this person. But it's kind of funny that the behavior between the sexes in these dating apps is completely different as well. Like completely different. Like women are generally much more selective and they read the bios and they look very methodically at the app profiles, and men are just like swiping, swiping, swipe, 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 swipe because um the likelihood of getting a match, even if you're like somewhat attractive, just like goes down tremendously. Like women are preferring like the same high status like men who are signaling these traits in these apps, and that's just creating a huge discrepancy, and it almost polarizes the amount of partners that you get in the extremes, right? So like the same high status signaling men in the apps, they get majority of the dates from these apps.
Isn't it
So it creates a
what they call the 666,
what was the 666?
six figure, 6 feet tall, and six
Yeah, yeah.
inches or more? Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So, but a lot of these that's the thing is, like, you can rent like, they have a place in LA, I don't know if you know about this, where you can literally rent, like, the inside of a private jet. It looks like a private jet, but it's actually just like a fuselage that's just been cut out, and people go in there just to take pictures of the inside, like, to make it look like they're flying in a private jet. I'm not kidding, like, this is real. There's people who rent, like, a Lamborghini for an hour to, like, they put on a blazer, a nice suit, and they'll sit on the hood of the Lamborghini, and they'll just stare off in the sunrise, and of course, it's not like, the message is quite obvious. It's like, "Look, I'm rich, I'm successful, you don't have to worry if you date me, like, I'm a good long-term material," and that's exactly why they do it because 'cause they're trying to signal that. They're trying to increase they're trying to game the system, essentially, right? It's like a, meta study on human behavior, and the same thing that marketers are doing on social media to create these viral hooks, like, people are trying to game the dating market and to increase the likelihood of getting a response. Um, there was another longitudinal study that was done by Sharabi and colleagues, and it followed active dating app users across 12 weeks and 4 waves. So it measured emotional exhaustion and feelings of inefficiency. So two core burnout dimensions, which increased over time. And users who started out lonely, anxious, or depressed burned out faster. So we're not just talking about depression and anxiety, we're talking about levels of burnout. The apps appear to compound existing vulnerability, right? Underlying tendencies. Any thoughts on that, Christian?
Well, as you mentioned, marketers prey on your vulnerabilities. They
Yeah.
know how psychology works. And if you're, physically or mentally vulnerable, you also have to imagine that they might not have put those guardrails in place, right? Very few products are safe for your well-being, right? They're not taught for that. They don't have their metrics. They don't have that in mind. And as the study mentioned, if you're already vulnerable, you're gonna burn out or cycle out or be depressed or be anxious or be angry from this system, because it is a game, it is a system, as you just exemplified with Lamborghini. I've heard of, or people actually maybe love driving a Lamborghini for a few hours. Maybe they want to show off as well, or we've
Yeah.
seen that in videos and stuff. But fake plane, yeah, that's a little bit interesting because there's no enjoyment in that. There's like, I'm faking to be in a private jet, but yeah, that's very interesting.
Essentially. Yeah. Yeah, it's just signaling, for a specific type of, status symbol and trying to attract a mate based on those metrics, but it's almost like short-term, like a
Of
short-term
course, I
dating
mean,
strategy because they're
how many times can you say, well, yeah, my private jet is in repair, or I
yeah,
lent it to my friend, right?
yeah,
So
exactly, "Where's the private jet? Where's the private jet?" Um, so, on the still on the topic of, dating apps, a separate 45 study systematic review links app use, so dating app use with body image harm, so body
yeah,
dissatisfaction, appearance, comparison, and this is plausible given the, interface is literally a face ranking loop, so, like, literally, it's purely superficial, a lot of these apps, Bumble, Hinge, Tinder, all of them, but effect sizes vary widely across studies. So, yeah, just by default, like, I wonder if there, like, would be like, a friend of mine, he told me this, like, he's from Saudi Arabia, and he says that a lot of the women on the dating apps there, they actually don't put their picture, and he's like, "Those are the ones that are, like, the highest value women that you wanna date," is because, first of all, they don't wanna be seen by their family and friends, and then they also, like, it's not necessarily that they're ugly, like, a lot of times they are very attractive. Um, the men really want to date these people, and so what he does, he just calls them and he talks to them for, like, an hour on the phone, and he wants to know what they're like. And, it's almost like that TV show Love Is Blind, essentially. I don't know if you've
yeah,
seen that, but
yeah.
not knowing. Yeah, yeah, purely connection.
I've seen enough not to watch much of it, but I I did see.
Mm, yeah,
And just to make a loop, and of course one of my jokes is coming. We talked about body image. How about plane image, right? So I think it's also affecting the
plain
plane or planeless image, right?
the plainlessness. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Uh,
No, it's at some points they have to reckon with, like, people finding out whether they have the plane or not, and, yeah, I don't know.
but yeah, interesting. Women also, we I think we've talked about it. Women don't always post their picture. Men don't too. I think there was 50% ish, plus or minus, of people who don't put recent or good or representative picture. So that's kind of what it is. So
Mhm.
no wonder there's fake planes around somewhere, and the person might look different and not in the plane. But more importantly, I think it's the constant judging, as you mentioned, right? Why does it affect body image, and perhaps women more than men? But one of the studies here in Canada, it's a team from Ontario, I forget which university, that did studies showing that many women don't even respond but they're using the dating app not to show status, but to kind of reaffirm that men are attracted to them, right?
Validation then.
Validation, right? So we saw, for instance, that there's less sex, there's less intimacy, there's less coupling, and couples last less than they did. But in all this uncertainty, perhaps some women and maybe some men with planes or not, they want to go there and say, "Hey, I'm wanted," because in real life I'm not. But if I get notification that some random man in my city or in Saudi Arabia or anywhere
Mhm.
swipe for me, then I can
Yeah.
sleep a little bit better at night. It's kind of like the likes in the videos and all this
Yeah.
artificial validation, right?
I have a client of mine who actually exhibits exactly this, what you're describing, that when he is getting, um, feeling rejected, essentially, he goes on a date with a girl, and she's like, "You know what? We should be friends," and he kinda spirals, and he gets extremely angry. He'll go back home and engage in a really bad habit, like go on a pornographic website, or a lot of times what he does is he goes on Tinder, and Tinder has an option of changing your geographic settings. So he changes it to Thailand, where he says he gets a lot more matches, even though there's no conceivable reality of him going on a date with one of these women in Thailand because he's living here in Germany. But he says he does it because it makes him feel validated and loved
Hmm.
and feel wanted. He wants to feel wanted by somebody, and when he's getting rejected, he hates that feeling, and so he just needs to see match with some Thai woman. It seems far-fetched when you describe it to other people, but it makes sense to that person who just wants to feel like they are desired, right? So, it doesn't surprise me that the women that you're describing also do it, right, for validation.
And thanks for explaining a real case of, like, that's how psychology works in a way. And when we talk about sex and intimacy and social status, and we talked in other podcasts about the human biology comes from a tribe, right? We
Right.
survive because we need each other, right? And we procreate because we are attractive enough to mate, right? So all those things are real drive that people have to deal with in a world that seems disconnected, because you're
Yeah.
embodied. You have to go, on a quick date with someone who has 10,000 other options of people that says that like that person for good or
Right.
bad reasons. And then you have to
Right.
go to Thailand, imaginarily seeing that you're being liked by people who probably, you will never see, and probably don't even like you, but you can have the fantasy that they do, right? And that's really problematic, right? So there's good things that we can imagine from technology, but that's definitely in conflict with our human nature. But to bring it back to the real social bonds, I had a conversation with a friend this week, who was telling me, I wish I had known some things about men and women relationship, because when I was younger I was like this. And
Mm.
we made a joke that he did not even get friend zone, he got the acquaintance zone, like below friendship.
Acquaintance zoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like,
Colleague zoned.
right, so but those, and I would say the younger generation, for them, because they don't develop those social skills to get rejected and get friend zone or acquaintance zone, and try
Yeah.
again, and have the courage to say that they like a woman or a man, right? So that's definitely something that the app has removed. This is the way that I show my appreciation. And I can show it 1,000 times in an hour.
Yeah.
What type of skills are you gonna get? Tendonitis, maybe, right?
Yeah, and it exacerbates the problem. It makes you feel lonelier the more short-term validation you try to seek. Yeah, and I think, in the case of this client of mine, I think he's using being with a person, to signal that he is wanted, when in reality, like, being with somebody is should not be the metric, of how lonely you are, because essentially you're setting yourself up for being unsatisfied with more and more partners if you're just with somebody who doesn't meet your expectations.
Hmm.
So, so it's this hole that needs to be filled constantly, and just not finding enough people that you can fall in love with fuels the problem, essentially. So dating apps are definitely I think a lot of people, in general, are getting very fed up with dating apps, and we're seeing more and more of these like single running clubs and like in-person activities cropping up in cities around the world because people are looking for some other um, met a way just to meet other people, and they're tired of it. Yeah, they're tired of just the whole online realm.
I just wanted to come back to touch for a while. Um, there is this interesting study that talks about the different firing of different parts of the brain, so the neuroscience of touch, right? And interestingly, like we saw that touch does not only correlate to where the object is that you're touching or is touching you, but it also roots to the limbic, the posterior insula, um, the emotional aspects of your brain are also mapped by touch. So we now know that there is touch linked to not only hormones but emotional states, right? And there's something called the social touch hypothesis that Scheimer and McGlone um, hypothesized about in 2023, and saying that there is a very complex um, pleasantness of touch, right? Different fibers, again, hug, palm touch, deeper touch, caress, vibration. So it's not a precise channel, but it englobes affectionate touch, positional touch, and it triggers hormones, immunosuppression with different nerve type. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, your mic is glitching a little bit again. But as to the touch point, um, so I think what we're talking about primarily, and I agree with everything you're saying. It sounds 100% plausible. We're talking about really at the biological level, the skin being the largest organ in the body, and the way that the skin transmits signals to the brain, right? You have a nervous system channel whose main job is to like be processing every time you have an affectionate touch. Not a touch for information, but a touch for bonding. So the skin carries essentially two broad touch systems: has fast, thickly myelinated A beta fibers that handle discriminative touch like pressure, texture, vibration, the what and the where of contact. And then you have the system that lets you feel your phone in your pocket, but you also have the system that is sensing for affectionate touch, right? That's the slower system. That's the unmyelinated tactile afferents, or the CT fibers. um, and that's usually not in the palms, but in hairy skin, the arms, backs, shoulders, scalp, and they fire maximally to one very specific stimulus, the slow, gentle, caressing like stroking at roughly 1 to 10 centimeters per second. So at skin temperature. So there was evidence done by Loken and colleagues, right? And they showed that all of these things are a social channel. So microneurography studies showed that CT firing rates track how pleasant people rate a touch. And there was a correlation found between CT firing and rated pleasantness that follows an inverted U. So peaking at the caress velocity. Faster and slower feels less pleasant, and the nerve fires less. So biologically, this is shown, is proven that physical touch, different types of physical touch, correlate to feelings of pleasantness. So where CT, and that again, CT was the C tactile afferents. Signals arrive, when they arrive, it's telling two. So they project preferentially to the posterior insula, the region that maps the body's internal emotional state, rather than to the primary somatosensory cortex where discriminative touch goes. So affectionate touch is routed toward the brain's emotional body map, not its measure the object map, going to very different places in the brain essentially. And this is often called the social touch hypothesis. And Shearer and McGlone in 2023, they studied it a little bit. CT fibers aren't the whole story. Palm touch can also feel pleasant, and A fibers contribute to pleasantness too. So there's a specialized channel that appears tuned for affectionate touch, but affection isn't reducible to one nerve type. I know there's a lot of information, but essentially at the end of the day, there's a lot of different types of nerves and that interpret different sensory nerve signals that corroborate what you said, essentially.
Yeah, thanks. Or is my mic a little bit better?
Sounds good now. Yeah, yeah, it sounds good.
Are you still? Um, yeah, it's kind of the idea that we can use. And I had this discussion with a guest that's coming in the podcast actually about learning as well, right? You can learn from touch, you can learn from olfaction and taste, you can learn visually, and we're gonna debunk the myth of learning style in a future episode. So stay tuned for this episode with our guest Tim. We also looked at like touch as a whole. What can it tell us physically, as you mentioned, emotionally? What can it trigger, and does it affect even our immune system, right? So there's this pretty crazy study where they actually from what I understood, injected or exposed people to not a deadly virus but a common cold, and then saw if people, 404 adults, if they hugged, were they more immune to a virus? And actually, they were, right? And the people that hugged more also, if they did get the virus, they had less severe symptom and recovered, before. So touch can affect so many things, including your immune system, basically.
So yeah, essentially, what you're saying is that people's livelihood depends upon physical touch and socializing, right? We talked about the pack of cigarettes analogy, but with loneliness before, but physical touch actually improves your immune system, and I think um, biologically it makes sense too. Just like touching, right, other people, you transmit germs, and this creates some sort of anti-fragile effect that just creates a stronger immune system. So makes 100% sense to me. Um, let's talk a little bit about affectionate touch again. So in 9-month-old infants, stroking at CT optimal velocity produced a measurable drop in heart rate. So the nervous system is audibly calming. Faster or slower stroking did not produce that sort of effect. Touch at the love velocity is physiologically soothing, and it's soothing early before it could be learned. So, like a priori, right? Right when the kid is born, that it's already transmitting some sort of signal. So it's not learned; it's literally a biological need that we have. And affectionate touch is also associated in the broader literature with oxytocin release, cortisol reduction, and pain attenuation. CT activation can blunt pain signals. So, on top of improving your immune system, it can basically reduce the pain that you feel. Um, and I think this was from Tiffany Field's touch research and colleagues who also performed these studies. Um, yeah, and I think, yes. So a little bit more about oxytocin. It's a two-way street. So a 2023 study found that giving people oxytocin increased both the rated pleasantness of and the neural response to gentle CT type stroking by raising peripheral oxytocin. So that's the bonding hormone that literally makes affectionate touch feel better, which makes you seek more of it, which releases more oxytocin. So it's a self-reinforcing loop. Oxytocin is a really important hormone when it comes to physical touch.
Agree. And oxytocin can be also produced in other social interaction. We talked about nonverbal communication, posture, laughter, smile, and we forgot to talk about eye contact, right? So eye contact is very important. We know that from birth, babies respond better with direct eye contact. We've had some still face experiment or people with no expression, or during again the pandemic we saw people with masks so you cannot see their whole face. All those things affect the level of bonding that you feel and connectedness, including the hormones oxytocin and vasopressin. And those are very important factors that we have to think about when we're living in this social media AI technology rich world. is that we may lose some of that if we don't pay attention.
Hmm. Yeah, so I just wanted to open up the floor for any audience members, anybody watching who has questions. Please feel free to drop it in the chat, whether that's about physical touch, intimacy, loneliness, dating apps, or any of the other topics that we touched upon today. Feel free to please drop it in the chat right now, and Christian and I will try to answer that question to the best of our ability. So essentially, there's a lot of studies showing that live face-to-face eye contact, so eye contact on top of physical touch, synchronizes activity across specific frontal, temporal, and parietal regions between two people. And this is studies from Joy Hirsch's lab at Yale. Coupling that is markedly reduced when the same two people interact over video. So essentially, what we're doing right now, we're talking, right? But it's not the same signaling that's going on to the brain as when you're in person, speaking to that person, engaging with them, looking them in the eyes. This is why it's also so important. I tell all my clients, but if they're going to eat, don't do it while looking at your phone. Do it with somebody else. Look them in the eyes, talk to them. And eating is a very social action, right? It's always been for ages. And nowadays, we see so many people just all alone watching things on their computer or on their phone, even at restaurants, just listening to stuff, watching stuff on the phone, and it's just depriving them of this activity in the brain. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts on eye contact, Christian? You're muted still. So,
Yes,
mhm,
so I think that eye contact cannot be completely simulated. Again, video call, we talked about this, is better than phone call.
yeah,
Phone call is better than email. Email is better than text, right? So there's and in person is always the best.
right.
There are things that we cannot do, but one thing that we can try to do with video is at least have virtual eye contact. For instance, when you're playing, video games with your friends,
Mhm,
you probably have an avatar. You're probably hearing them, but not seeing really eye contact. You're seeing a simulation, right? So you're missing out on that part if you're in the virtual world. So just things to think about, right? When can you at least have the closest ability to have eye contact, right? So Mark is in Europe. I'm in North America now. This is the best eye contact that we can have at this moment, right?
mm,
Uh, but if we were doing other types of interaction, we might miss that. So just keep that in mind. And we don't always need to see each other. I see Mark too often. Just joking. But
mhm,
when we do it, we can have this because, for instance, just this joke lands better because he can see that I'm joking, I'm smiling while I'm saying
yeah.
that, right? So
And
direct eye
this way we
contact.
yeah, we encourage also people when we are on video calls, we encourage people to turn on their camera so we can see them, not because we wanna know what they're doing, but just for that actual purpose of being able to see their facial expressions and connect with them a little better while you're on a call. Um, so important. Um, so regarding physiological synchrony, heart rate, skin conductance, and those sort of things, the findings are a lot more robust and they're growing in the literature, and it's associated with empathy, rapport, and secure attachment. And um, it's still when I say associated, it's still something that's being worked out in the studies, but there is largely a correlation that is directly between these two things here. Um, so when essentially when you have teenagers who are hanging out entirely through the screens, they're getting words and faces, but the gaze channel is degraded and the synchrony is weaker. Not just screens, but also like on Xbox Live or video games. So it cannot entirely supplant the need for friendship and connection that you get in person. Essentially, even though more and more people might be doing it for validation and short-term rewards, it is in fact biologically and scientifically proven that it is driving people apart from each other and making a lot of people more unhappy. So,
Well, I remember playing a lot with my friends a few games of staring contests or holding by the chin and trying not to laugh, right?
right.
Now how are we doing that? I think that's we need to bring that back, staring contests, and laughing contest. Just to clarify a little bit for the audience, as we're trying to keep the science as straight and current as possible, and if we're making any mistakes and you're a scientist, we're happy to review and update anything that you've found or new studies. We talked a lot about oxytocin. It's one of my favorite hormone words. Oxytocin is not the love hormone, it is the bonding hormone, and it's not the only one as well. There is something called vasopressin, which is normally more expressed in men, but actually, both women and men have both vasopressin and oxytocin. Women have more oxytocin receptors as well, and women use oxytocin to bond with their child, with childbirth. Men also
Mhm.
use oxytocin to bond with their children, their friends, and their mates. And the big difference is actually the receptors and the ratio. Both of them are helping different aspects, or sometimes the same aspect, depending if you're male or female, of
Mhm.
bonding. Not love directly. Love is actually a term I don't like. I think it's vague, and if I were to say that, I would construe love as action, not as an emotion, right?
Mhm.
So love is better in my construct of happiness in a relationship, seen as
Mhm.
I do an action towards with care, with compassion, and the emotions that you can feel love can be excitement, admiration, appreciation, gratitude, attraction, right? If it's sex, it can be attraction. Love is kind
Mhm.
of a mix of all those real things that we call love. But oxytocin is the bonding part, right? So it creates connection and bonding, and that's why it's one of my favorite hormones: oxytocin and vasopressin.
Oxytocin and vasopressin are among the two best love and intimacy hormones out there. Um, for the viewers, Christian, if somebody were to try to take away one crucial message from or a piece of advice from everything that we've discussed today, what would you try to give to the audience?
Intimacy is real. It's needed.
Mhm.
It's eroding. And we have Eros, the Greek god of love and passion, to come back and help. We have Cupid,
Mhm.
inspired by Cupid as an AI tool. We have Mark and myself. We have your romantic partner that you can talk to. You have your family members that you can talk to. Intimacy is right next to you, but probably most of us have slowly lost some of it
Right.
due to social media, to AI, to technology, to culture as well.
Mhm.
And we're just here to tell you at Awe Digital Wellness, you can have more awe, you can have more intimacy in your life, and you will be healthier and happier, and people around you will be healthier and happier when you do that.
So, if you are a parent of a child who is suffering from loneliness or extended screen use, or you're a relative of a loved one, if you know somebody, a friend who is also suffering from this, don't hesitate to check out awdigitalwellness.com or allwellness.com to find more resources on how you can help these people and perhaps get in touch with somebody from our team. Christian, it's a pleasure talking. Is there any other final point that you want to share with the audience, anybody who's watching today?
First, thanks for the listeners today and always. I think we're approaching our 50 podcast milestone, and it's always a
Woo!
pleasure to do them with you, Mark. We
Yes.
have many more guests again in July and August. I spoke to one yesterday that we will have a great discussion. Uh, do we know who the guest is for next week? I think it's on Friday the 17th. Um, if
I'm
not, you
not.
can
Yeah.
check us out on of course, LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and YouTube.
Mhm.
And last thing, I wish that you don't have to do 80 hugs, but if you give three more hugs, and you don't have to think of me either, but if you
Yeah.
can do three hugs from our suggestion at Awe today, let us know in the comments if those hugs were worth it. You don't have to say how long they were with who, but do hugs help the world? I think so. I've tried to do free hugs movements in a few cities in the world, and that's not the only way to do it. You can just do that again consensually with people around you.
Mhm.
And so this is my last suggestion: have one, two, or three more hugs today.
Such good advice. Go hug somebody, guys. And thanks so much again for watching the AWE Digital Wellness Weekly Podcast. I'm Mark Ritter with Christian Dominique. Please join us next time, next Friday, not another Wednesday podcast, for your weekly dose of all things related to digital wellness, digital addiction, and how to help others in your life who may be suffering. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mark.
All right.